We're here with a quick tip video on spacing and style. So at this point in your Java programming, it's worth taking a step back to think about how you decide to arrange your code to make it more readable and to make it look nicer to you. So as you're writing an if statement, you'll notice that in this demonstration code, your if statement has no space before the parentheses, and there's no space before you start your equals, your equivalent statement. There's no spaces in the middle, and then it just kind of reaches the end here. That's perfectly okay, and this will work just fine. This is probably the most efficient way to do this. But you can also space this out, adding spaces between each of the different pieces. The reason this is okay is because Java actually ignores white space. So to Java, all of this is basically coming in as one long line. The only thing that matters to Java is going to be like the parentheses and the curly brackets. So it doesn't matter where you add spaces. It's not going to affect how the code actually runs, but it does impact how readable your if statements are. So when I look at this, my preference is to not have spaces next to the parentheses, but I do like to leave a little space here in the middle so we can see this equivalence, and then also leave a space after my if statement. The other thing you want to think about when you're designing if statements is how you're going to use curly braces. So remember, and you've seen this with one line right after an if statement, if you're using one line that comes right after, you don't actually have to have curly braces. But when you want to include more information inside of the if statement or more lines of code, you're going to need curly brackets that surround, let's say I also wanted to print out it has two wheels. Now that I have two lines of code, I need to have these curly braces or curly brackets to surround and group those lines together. So this is one way to do it, and this is my preference, is to have a curly bracket here directly under the if statement and then one closing that's directly in line. The other way you might see this commonly done is instead of having this under the if statement, having it right after the condition. And you'll see that coming up throughout this lesson as well. Okay, so as you start to design your code, two things to keep in mind. One is that you want to make sure your code is readable. And two, none of this style stuff is going to affect the logic of your code. It's only going to affect how it looks to someone who's reading it and how it looks to you. So you want to make conscientious choices about how you space out your if statements and where you put your curly brackets. And be prepared that when you read other people's code, you might see things that are done slightly differently, and you'll eventually start to develop your own style about where you think these things should go. That's it with your quick tip on spacing, curly brackets, and styling your if statements.